in a quarter of
the Tvach, the Zimmer. We're learning as a schutz for Shalema Filam Chayev Asarach and for Meir Ben Cyril Perel. We are on Chaf Beis Amid Aleph, 6 lines from the top, but we are going to have to recapitulate a little bit in order to get ourselves a running start, right? So we had talked about the machlokes between the Tanakam and Reb Shimon about when you do malika on a oila saif, which is the you have to do both simanim on a oila saif, right? By the chata saif it says lo yavdil, you shouldn't separate it, but by the oila saif, as we're going to see, you do have to do the simanim. So back on Daf Chaf Aleph Amid Aleph, we had said my rabban right at the bottom, my rabban rabban Shalom the Tanya, Fesasheni yasa oila kamishpat. It says it's talking about by carbon oil of where you bring two ifis. So one is a Torah b'nei Yaina, so one is a oilas oif and one is a chatas oif. So the second one should be sheni yasa oila should be the second bird should be an oila kamishpat like the other one. But kamishpat we don't know what it means. So it says kamishpat chatas behem. So you understand that the Gemara explains, the Tanakam explains, that's coming to tell you that should be like the Chatas Behema. Machatz Behema Eina Boil Min HaChullin B'yoyim B'yodei HaMonis Avel Zoiv Eina Boil Min HaChullin B'yoyim B'yodei HaMonis. These separate dinim that have to do, that you learn out from Chatas Behema to Oilosai. But then the Brisa continues in the Tanakama. Imala Halom B'roiv Shnayim Avkam B'roiv Shnayim. Maybe I'll say just like the Chatas Behema, you do roiv of the simanim, right? A behema, there's no din of havdalah that you have to go through the whole siman, the veshet and the kana. Just has to be the roiv. Maybe you should say the same thing by the oila. That also has to have shnayim, two simanim. They both have to be just roiv. Tamalemu malik v'hiktir. The Torah compares the malika to the aktara. Ma'aktara haroish ba'atzmai v'aguf ba'atzmai. Just like the aktara is done when you burn the oif, the head is separated from the guf. Af malika haroish ba'atzmai v'aguf ba'atzmai. They have to be separated, meaning all of the two simanim, and that's the sheet of the Tanakama. You have to do the entire two simanim. We'll skip Rabbi Shmuel, and go to the bottom of the Yomid. Rabbi Eliezer Rabbi Shimon Omer kamishpat chatas oif. He says kamishpat is not going back on chatas behema, but rather on chatas oif. Mal alon oichas b'roish ubeguf, just like by umaze, just like by the chatas oif, you take the behema. I'm sorry, not the behema, the oif, and you grab the head together with the body while they're still attached, and you do hazaf kan oichas b'roish ubeguf umaze. So too, legabe the oila, you hold them together. Maika Amar, Hakamam, Gshu Oichas Haroish Beguf Maze, Afkan Gshu Ochuz Haroish Beguf Maze. Ochuz, meaning it has to be bedaf when they're attached, not when they're separated. So it's telling you that fakert, that by Oila, it's like the Chatas Ha'if, that there is no separation. Imala Lom B'Simen Echad, Afkan B'Simen Echad. Maybe you'll say, okay, if we're comparing it to the Chatas Saif, the Chatas Saif, you only do one siman. Maybe the Eilu Saif also only needs one siman. Talmud Loim V'Hikrivoi. Torah says V'Hikrivoi that tells you that they're not the same. V'Hikrivoi, this is brought like this. It's not the same as the Chatas Saif, that the Eilu Saif is two simanim and the Chatas Saif is one siman. Okay, so that brings us up to where we're up to. V'Tana Kama. Since, according to Tanakama, since we have umalak v'hiktir, which tells you that that's where he ended off, he said that the haktara Just like the Haktarah has to be when they're separate, when you burn the oif, so to the Malika has to be separate. Then what do you need Vekrivai to tell you a nafkamina between the Chata Saif and the Ayla Saif? They're anyways different because we have a Malik Vahikta, which tells you it has to be fully separated, which obviously means two Simonim fully the fully cut. No, we needed to tell you that the Tanakh Taka learns that Kamishpat is going on Chatas Behema, not Chatas Saif. But if we didn't have Vikrivai, I would have said it is like saying Kamishpat Chatas Saif. V'imishum umalak v'hikter havamina ma'aktar b'rosh mizbeach. Umalak v'hikter tells you it's not the same as the Chatas Saif. So why? How could you have thought without Vikrivai that it would have been like the Chatas Saif? Havamina ma'aktar b'rosh mizbeach. Af malika b'rosh mizbeach. If not for Umalak Hikter, what is that telling you? Right? Umalak Hikter is telling you something about the Malika, but according to him, it's not saying that you have to fully separate them like the Haktara. It's just telling you where the Malika should be. The Malika should be B'Rosh Hashem Mizbech, not the way Rabbi Elazar Rav Shimon used it to tell you that it's fully that it has it's not fully separated. They're just like the Hazah is V'guf Maz. So tomorrow hash the koser rachmana v'krivai dorish beinami hash the koser rachmana v'krivai dorish beinami ha. And now the Torah says a krivai, so we're able to learn that as well. Haktorah, once we have v'krivai, that tells you to tell you both things. First, Malika's b'rosh Hashem mizbeach, like we just learned out, as well as umalak v'hikter to tell you, according to the Tanakama, that the body of the bird has to be fully separated like it is when it's burnt on the mizbech. Right? We had listed three things that we learn out according to the Tanakama. The first one was that we learn out from Chatas Behema. That's Eina Ba'elam and Chullin u'biyoyim biyodei haYemanis. So the first thing we said, Eina Ba'elam and Chullin. Where do we get that from? Bikar Aaron is parachatas sheshaloi. It says that Aaron should bring the parachatas, his parachatas, asher loy mishaloi v'loy mishal tzibur v'loy mishal meiser. It tells you it has to be his. It can't be either from the tzibur or from meiser sheni. So we learn from there, just like the chatas of Aaron only can be from his own funds. It can't be any kind of other benefit, like where it's from Ma'aser Sheni or from the Tzibur. So it tells you also, Legabi in general, that the Chatas Behema, all Chatoyas of a Behema, are only Mishel Chullin, not Mishel Mais. In fact, the second din that we learned out from the Hekesh to Chatas Behema, from Chatas Behema to Chatas Oif, we said should be B'yayim. In fact, Gemara B'yayim Tzuvesi Nafka. We have a general limud from B'yayim Tzuvesi that tells you that all karbanos are brought by day. So what do you need a separate one to tell you the Chatas Ha'oif that you learn out from Chatas Behema? So Gemara Kadinaspa. Once we list that as well, but Ein Chanami, it's not necessary to learn it out from this Hekesh. You could have learned it directly from B'yayim Tzuvesi. The third thing, Yadei Ha'emanis, the third thing that we said, that you learn out that it's brought with the right hand. The Rav Bachana Nafka. We've seen this a number of times. Rav Bachana, Rav Shimon ben Lakish, Kol Makush Nemar Etzbay Kahuna Ene El Yamin. Whenever it says either Etzba, whether the Torah says Etzba or Kahuna, it's only referring to the right hand. So what do we need a special limud from Chatas Behema to Chatas Ha'oif? Chatas Ha'oif, it also says Kahuna. It's done by the Kohen. The other man who says, why does he taka learn it out? Kahuna b'ya etzba lo b'ya kahuna. Kahuna itself is not enough to learn it out, like we've seen before. But you learn out if it says etzba, that taka tells you it has to be with the right hand. But just kahuna does not necessarily mean with the right hand, unless it also says etzba. Back to Gemara, finally. V'tana Kama of Rabbi Elazar Rav Shimon, that they don't say like Rabbi Shmuel. Rabbi Shmuel had learned the lima to tell you mimola oirif, that it doesn't mean on the back of the head of the chicken, but of the bird, but rather by the back of the neck. Mimola oirif, and not the oirif itself. Not gami milika and milika. They learn out from the since the halacha of malika, since the Torah said how malika is done by chatas ayif, it tells you the same thing by. We're going to learn the same thing by the malika of Eilas Eif. You don't need a hekesh for that. You could just say a memotzinu, and it could be we're learning out from Chatas Behemo, or we're learning out something else from this hekesh of Chatas Eif, but that we could still learn it out from general principles that Malika is done only in one way, in the mul eirif, in the back of the neck, and not the back of the head. Now the Gemara, the next Mishnah is going to go into a series of comparisons between different things. Since we were talking about ifus, we're going to talk about the different types of ifus, but it's not really going back to the original discussion so much. It's really it starts off a new series of Mishnayos. I talk about a series of discussions of comparisons. We say kosher b'Torah, right? The Torah says, I think it's pasuk Yud Gimel Yudalid in Vayikra, right at the beginning. It says mina Torah oymin b'nei hayoina. That's the way the Torah describes it. From the Torah, which is, I think that's the doves, and the Bnei Yaina is the young pigeons. Bnei is a lashon of young. So we say kosher b'Turim possible Bnei Yaina. That which is kosher by Turin, meaning by the doves that are supposed to be older. If it's that age, those simanim that show that it's old enough, if you'd have that by the Bnei Yaina, which are supposed to be young, it would be pasul. And kosher Bnei Yaina pasul b'Torah. And vice versa would also be the case. Tchilas hatziv bezeh bezeh pasul. But there's an intermediate stage. This is not like we've seen by behemoths, by a keves and ayil, which is going to be the next Mishnah, that a keves has to be a lamb of a year old, and an ayil is a 2-year-old sheep. This is not the same thing by the birds. By the birds, there are external simanim that indicate us when it becomes big and young. It doesn't go by its birthday. So the Mishnah is telling you that there's this period where it's no longer young, but it's not yet old enough. It's too young to be a Bnei Yaina, but it's not yet old enough to be a Torah. And that's when Tchilas Hatziv, when it starts to get gold or yellow. Around the neck, there are certain feathers. How does Rashi say it? Tchilas Hatziv shebezeh pasul. Tchilas Hatziv k'shemaskil lahavi nutza yafa tzuhuva sava l'tzava. When it starts to get golden feathers around its neck, psulim bezeh bezeh. It's going to be pasul both as a Torah and as a Bnei Yaina. For Torah, it's too young. It's not yet completed the process of getting golden feathers. It has to be complete. So it's not yet old enough, and for Bnei Yaina, it's already graduated out of being a young pigeon. Okay. Zaktimar. Taraban, Tyron Gedoylin Ksherim, large Tyron, older Tyron are kosher. Katanim Psulim, younger ones are pasul. And Bnei Yaina, it's the other way around. Bnei Yaina Katanim Ksherim Gedoylin Psulim. Those have to be young. Bnei is a lashon of youth. So they have to be young, and the Gedoylin are psulim. Nimtza kosher b'Torah pasul Bnei Yaina, kosher Bnei Yaina pasul b'Torah. So what's going to be kosher for one is going to be pasul for the other, vice versa. Tan Rabban, Torah gedolim v'loy ktanim. The Torah says we're going to explain what this limud is, but it's a limud that tells you Torah gedolim v'loy ktanim, that it's ma'akev, that Torah have to be old and they can't be young. Because I would have thought I might have thought to say kavachaymer. If the pigeons, which are only kosher as young, they're kosher when they're young, even though they're going to be pasul when they're old. The Torah that are kosher when the gedolim, certainly they should be kosher when the ktanim. So the Gemara, to the Brisa reiterates Torah gedolim v'lo ktanim. That we tell you that's why the Torah tells you Torah which should tell you only gedolim and not katanim in spite of this kal v'chayma. Then the Torah also says a secondly, b'nei yaina katanim v'lo gedolim. That tells you that b'nei yaina have to be katanim, and if the gedolim they're not going to, it's going to be ma'akev. Sheyachol. I might have thought alei dinu. Matam shel yuchshul b'katanim huchshul b'gedolim b'nei yaina shel b'katanim and din huchshul b'gedolim. The exact opposite kal v'chaymer. If the doves which are puzzle when they're young are kosher when they're old, certainly the doves which are kosher when they're young should be kosher when they're old. Now the Gemara says, "My Talmud. What is this limud?" We said two limudim. We said Tairim, which means that it's bedafka, that the Tairim have to be gedolim, and if not, they're pasul. And b'nei yaina tells you that the yainim have to be ketanim, and if not, they're going to be pasul. Where do you see that in the words? Amarava leilishtamit krav alichtav min bnei ha-Tairim oy min ha-yaina. From the fact that the Torah often refers to the Tairim and Bnei Yaina, and it never once says it the other way, Bnei HaTairim, or from the Yaina, that tells you from the fact that it keeps on saying, it's not just because it says over here Tairim, but it always says Tairim, that tells you, that's like a Shana Lov La'akev, that tells you that the Tairim is Bedafka. But the Gemara says, okay, so that's an answer for the Tairim. Maybe when the Torah said Bnei Yaina, why did so the Gemara says it's still we don't know. It says Bnei, which is a lashon of young Katanim in Gedolim Loi, but Tairim. I said it if I cared. The first one was to tell you that b'nei yaina are only when they're katanim, but not gedolim from the fact that the Torah never calls them yainim; it always calls them b'nei yainim. But now we're asking, what about the other way around? How do we know the Torah? Maybe it's only applies to katanim to Torah. But Tairim maybe Tairim are still not ma'akiv. So Gemara says no, it's a hekesh between, since they're put together in the pasuk, so we assume that they both have the same restriction, that it has to be as the Torahs describe them. The Tairim have to be older Tairim, and the Yainim have to be b'nei Yaina, younger Yainim. I might think any kind of Tairim or any kind of Bnei Yainu should be kosher. What is that coming to be mayit? Ma Bnei Hayoina loy kol Bnei Hayoina prat. Ma Bnei Yaina v'loy kol Bnei Yaina. We come to exclude not all Tairim and not all Bnei Yaina. What is that coming to exclude? Prat l'tchilas hatziyuf shebezeh v'shebezeh shepasul. It's coming like the end of our Mishnah, that when the birds, either a Torah or Bnei Yaina, reach a stage of the Tchilas Tziyav, where they start to get slightly mature, so at that point they're in an intermediate stage, they're neither qualified as a young Bnei Yaina, nor are they qualified as an adult Torah. From what point do the Torah become adults, sufficiently adult that they're kosher to be brought? Meshi is hivu, when they become fully gold. And when do Bnei Yaina graduate from being young enough to be brought as a carbon? Mishiatz hivu, when they get a little bit yellow. When the yellowness starts around their neck, that's a sign that they've matured past being Bnei Yaina. Tani Yaakov Karcha. Me'emosai Bnei Yaina Ksherim. He said a slightly different version from when are Bnei Yaina kosher, meaning he's saying a different din, that there has to be, they can't be infant babies, infant birds. They have to be big enough that they're no longer chicks, that they're actually birds. Young birds still, Bnei Yaina, but when do they become old enough to be Bnei Yaina? This is not relevant for the Tairim, because the Tairim have to be much older. But Yainim essentially are from birth, but they have a little bit of time that they're not yet, it's not appropriate to bring them as a carbon. Mishiyalu. What does that mean, Mishiyalu? Hu tani l'hu amarla. He said this and then he explained it. Efroiche ya'alu dam. Efroichim, birds, their or their feathers will or the young birds will Rashi teaches that swallow down. When is that? Amos amrabaya michishamit gad famine vasi damo. When if you pull out a feather, when a bird has enough dam in it, it has a circulatory system that's sufficiently developed that if you pull out a feather, it draws blood. At that point, it's a full-fledged bird that it can be a bnei yaina and brought it to carbon. Boy Reb Zera, ha'imar re'alai oila min atayim min bnei hayina. Someone who says, I'm bringing an oila, and he doesn't say what he's bringing it from. He says, I'm bringing from Tyrim, from either Tyrim or from Bnei Yaina. Vehevi tchilas hatziav, and he brought that intermediate animal, that it's one of the, it's, he brought actually one of each. He brought one Tyrim, and one Bnei Yaina, that was both at that intermediate stage that we said before is possible for both of them. Mao, what is the din? What's the problem with bringing that intermediate stage? Do we say the reason why it's possible at that time is really there's a time when it goes straight from being a youth to an adult, but we don't know exactly when that is. So by tchilas hatziv, when the bird is at that intermediate stage, we don't know which one it is, so therefore we passel it. But in this case, since he brought one of each, the manavshach, whatever the exact point is, they were both exactly the same at the same stage, so they would certainly one of them was kosher. Like Dilma Ber Yahavi v'lo nafik. Or do we say that tchilas hatziv is just it's a fully differentiated stage. It's a different stage. It's a different barrier that doesn't qualify either as a youth or as an adult. It's in between, and therefore it's going to be possible for both of them.
In the first Sveka have Menafik, right?
Right, then he would be Yaitza, because we don't either the Tyre or the Bnei Yaina. One of them was if whatever the stage is, whatever that stage is, whether it's considered a youth or an adult, one of them is going to be good. He brought two separate birds that were both in that intermediate stage. Can you still hear me? Oh, I think he's frozen.
I hear you well.
Yeah, and I think Luzzy, is frozen. I see Rob is rolling along, listening intently. Right, yeah. But Luzzy is frozen. Let me give him a second because he was asking something. I would pause the recording, but I know that then I'm gonna forget to turn it back on when he comes back. Okay, I think we're gonna have to go on, and when he comes back, we'll talk about it. Oh, so Luzzy.
Yeah.
What was your so the point is that we're talking about where he brought two birds. One was the Tyre and one was a Bnei Yaina.
So is he Yaita in the first Sveka? Is he Yaita on both or just one out of two?
Well, he said I'm going to bring one of two. He's going to bring either Tyre or Bnei Yaina. So he only was mechayiv to bring one.
Either way, he's got.
So either way, he can't be mechayiv Yaitza two because one of them obviously is no good. But he was Yaitza what he promised to do. So Amarava Toshma. We said before in the Brisa, Prat l'tchilas hatziv shebezeh shepasul. We said except for at the beginning of when it turns yellow, that both of them are pasul. Yam b'shalom ber yahavi shaper. Then we can understand why it's pasul. Yam b'tzveika havi. It's recrawl l'mutei sveika. We said that we have a pasuk that told you that tchilas hatziv is no good. Now, what do we need a pasuk for? If the whole point, if this is just a pragmatic problem that we don't know whether tchilas hatziv is adult or youth, Why would the Torah go to the bother of telling us that a suffix is possible? It's because of dinei sveika that it's possible. It's not a din in birds. So from the fact that we do have a pasuk that tells you that it's not going to be good, vice versa, that it's a different berry, and that's what it's telling you. So Gemara says, no, that's not what the pasuk was telling you. So what we said before, min b'nei yaina, that told you that not all, we said min atayrim, or min b'nei yaina, that's coming to exclude not all tayrim and not all b'nei yaina, which we had thought to mean tchilasiv. The Gemara says, no, it's coming to tell you something else. And Taka, this still remains a question. It's coming to exclude a bird that was either subject to revia, where it was a person was mizana with it, or never the person worshipped the bird. Now these things, we've always seen that those are puzzle to be brought as a carbon. So why do we need a separate pasuk for oif? So Gemara said that the Chamina hel v'ksiv ki mashchas bahem ki mashchasam bahem mumbam. The Torah says mashchasem and it calls it mumbam. It's a mum. The Tana Beri Vishmal kol makom shenem hashchasa. Whenever we mention hashchasa, eine ella devar erva v'avodas kechavim. That's a reference to Dvar Erva, which is a Reveya, Nirva, and Avayz Gichavim, which is Nevad. Dvar Erva, Dichsev, Ki Hishus Kol Basar is Dark Eil. By the Mabul, we says Ki Hishus Kol Basar, and the Torah describes that it was because of Erva. Avayz Gichavim, Dichsev, Hen Tashchisam, Vasisam Luchem Pesel. The Torah calls Tashchisam, Vasisam Luchem Pesel. When you'll do a Hashchasa, and you'll make an idol. So you see that Avodah Zarah is also called Hashchasa. And we said, we compared hashchasa to a mum. So kol mum paisa boy davar erva vayzgechavim paisa boy. Kol she'ena mum paisa boy ain't davar erva vayzgechavim paisa boy. So it tells you, this pasuk tells you that only we're suggesting, it's telling you only something that's capable of having a mum will avodah zara and erva passel it. So maybe I would have said therefore that a nevet or a nirva by an oif would be kosher. So that's what we have. We have to have the pasuk min to tell you that nirva and nevad, not like this lima would have told you, that they're going to be taka pasal for a carbon. If there's Thomas as opposed to a mum and zachrus, and there's no such concept of zachar and a keva legabe a oif for carbonis. That's why we need this limud, limute nerva v'nevad. Okay, we'll stop over here. Let's continue tomorrow at 10 to 8, the regular time.
Thank you.